Evening everybody. It is Monday 17th of October and I need to play catch up, big start, because I was going to film last night and this head cold, which you can probably tell hasn't quite gone yet, was full on last night. I had a massive headache and I would have been no use to anyone. I wasn't particularly much use to my wife, who is still covering, but the thought of doing a couple of whiskies last night was just not a good idea at all. So I've got to get one done. I'll do two tonight, get one edited up quite quickly before we hit midnight, because I've got to get it every day. So we've finished Irish and we shall move on to Japanese. Irish was interesting, and because I want to talk about Japanese whiskey generally in this first one, I'm not going to go in depth into what I thought of Irish, but I do like Irish whiskey. It was a little bit flat. It didn't feel particularly exciting. There are some very exciting Irish whiskies, but generally it just didn't quite grab me as I thought it would do. I'm looking forward to doing Japanese, mainly because I've not had many. The ones that I've had have been very, very good indeed. My fear is that Japanese whiskey might be slightly overrated. I think because it's a bit more expensive, because not that much of it gets exported. It's getting better, but it was not that long ago that Japanese whiskey tended to be held purely in Japan, and it was very difficult to get Japanese whiskey which was getting well reviewed, but was hard to find. So it sort of gets a bit of hype going, and then all of a sudden, like, oh, you've got to get some Japanese whiskey. Oh, and is it a case of it's actually better? Is it you're making it? You feel like it's better than it actually is because you've had to pay over the odds for it, or it's taken you a while to find it, that sort of thing. So it'll be interesting to see how we get through these 10. I've got 10 Japanese whiskies. I've got 100 whiskies left to go. This is 267, so we've got 100 left. 275 I will be hitting the 3/4 mark, so I will be doing my quarterly review. Quite looking forward to that. So let's crack on. So let's talk about Japanese whiskey generally, because Japanese whiskey, unlike Irish and American and Scotch, is a relatively new market. It really only took off. Now, there was whiskey production in the late 1800s, from about 1870 onwards. Sake and other spirits were the predominant force in spirit production, alcoholic spirits in Japan. Sake is the national drink, as it were. Whereas whiskey production kind of started to, the Japanese are quite an insular people, they're quite an insular country, and it takes quite a while for outside culture to kind of permeate and influence, because they're very kind of almost protective of their history and their culture. And whiskey was being discovered. Scotch was big, Irish was big, American was big, and it was starting to seep in. And some of these brewers were starting to realise, well, actually we could do this. We could do this sort of thing. So there was sort of unofficial whiskey production in the 70s, but really, commercially, Japanese whiskey is down to two men. Now, I can't put two pictures up at once on my editing software, so I should do the first one, which is this guy, which is Masataka Taketsuru. And the second guy is this guy, who is Shinjiro Tori. Now, basically in kind of 1919 to 1923 is when Japanese whiskey, you can kind of date it as this is when Japanese whiskey began. Now, Taketsuru, who I'll put his picture up again, was from a brewing company, a sake brewing company, and he went to Scotland in 1918 with a view of actually finding out more about whiskey and whiskey production. He worked at the Longmorn distillery, and he also spent 5 months working in Campbelltown at the Hazelburn distillery, and he actually married a Scottish woman while he was over there, who came back with him to Japan. And he he joined forces with Shinjiro Tori. I'll put him back up again, who was a pharmaceutical wholesaler who moved into drinks and became interested in spirits, and it was kind of the scientific side of it as well. Now, the intention was initially to open a distillery on the northern island, which is called Hokkaido. And that was what Taketsuru wanted to do. Was there is elements of Japan in terms of geography and geology, which is quite similar to Scotland. and it's almost a bit like kind of New Zealand has elements of Scotland as well, but never really took off with whiskey production. But there is sort of climate and geography and geology and similar aspects to Scotland within Japan as a country. So Taketsuru wanted to open this distillery in Hokkaido, but Tori actually kind of vetoed that idea. And the first distillery that opened was in 1923, but apparently it's kind of, there's a bit of a blur. Did they actually start in 1919? Was it 1923? It's all a bit iffy. And he built the Yamazaki distillery, which is here, near Kyoto, in 1923. Now, Taketsuru was distillery manager until he left in 1934, and he left to set up the Yoichi distillery, which is on Hokkaido, on that northern island. And they became two separate companies. There's Suntory, which is Tori's company, Shinjiro's Tori's company, and they own two distilleries. They own Yamazaki, and they also own the Hakushu distillery, which is here. Taketsuru, who set up Yoichi, also it became the Nikka company, and they've got Yoichi and the. Now I'm really going to struggle with the pronunciations. I do apologise. If you're Japanese, please don't get offended if you're watching this. I'm doing my best, even without a cold. I really struggle, but I think it's the Miyagikyo distillery or Miyagikyo distillery, which is here. So there are two distilleries with these two companies. They pretty much dominate the Japanese whiskey market. Suntory, you'll more than likely have heard, mainly because of Lost in Translation, the Bill Murray film. Bill Murray, Scarlett Johansson, directed by Sofia Coppola, Francis Ford Coppola's daughter. Nikka never really had that cultural influence in the Western way, but in Nikka and Suntory, if you've heard of one, you've probably heard of the other. There are some other distilleries. Now, I'm going to try and put up a map if I can, which has got kind of various distilleries. I think the one that I'm thinking of in my head has got closed distilleries on as well, but there are some other operational distilleries. There's Chichibu, which is 2 hours northwest of Tokyo. There's Igashima, which also makes sake, and I had never heard of, but I ended up in Marks and Spencer's today, just outside York, and they actually had a whiskey from Igashima there. 34 quid it was, and part of me thinks I should have picked it up because I don't have one of theirs on the challenge. There's Fujiga Temba, which is actually at the base of Mount Fuji, and then Shinsuma's, which is, I can't remember where that is, and is a relatively small distillery. So that's Japanese whiskey in a pretty large rambling nutshell. It's relatively new in terms of an industry, but the great thing about Japanese whiskey is because they're new, they're not afraid to experiment. They like to try and be different. The impression I get with Japanese whiskey is when they started, when Taketsuru and Tori kind of started, they wanted to not emulate Scotch, but pay homage to it. So Tori in particular was trying to look at, because they've got Yamazaki, but Hakushu was even more of a Scotch distillery, and Hakushu you tend to find is slightly more peated and smoky. And they were paying homage to Scotch, but they weren't trying to copy it. They were trying to go, okay, we understand Scotch is almost the kind of the core of whiskey generally worldwide. You know, you've got American, you've got Irish, but it all stems from Scotch in particular. So we'll pay homage to it, but we won't be afraid to experiment. We won't be afraid to kind of try new things and work with casks or levels of peat or the malt that we use or anything like that. And the two I'm going to do tonight are actually not the more experimental ones, but evidence of how the Japanese whiskey industry isn't afraid to kind of play around with things and experiment and still maintain quality, or at least attempt to maintain quality, but not go as, you know, the Scotch Whisky Association is, no, we do it like this and it must be like that, and you can't tell people what's in it, and you do this and everything is, we've done this for centuries and this is how we will do it. Or be really secretive and go, we're not going to tell you how we're doing it, we're going to keep quiet about this, but we want you to pay over the odds for it anyway. So the first one I'm going to have tonight is Hibiki Harmony. Now this was a sample that I managed to snaffle from Eddie and Joe at the Whiskey Lounge at their base in York. Again, I'll say this every single time: if you've not encountered the guys at the Whiskey Lounge, if you've not been to any of their whiskey festivals or their tastings, you're an idiot. You should do. They're an absolutely fantastic bunch, and they're brilliant. They're just great. So, Hibiki Harmony, which is it's from the Suntory Company. And Hibiki was it was launched in 1989 to commemorate the 90th anniversary of the Suntory Company, not the launch of the whiskies, but the Suntory Company itself. And Hibiki is essentially their brand name of their blended whiskies. So Hibiki itself actually means resonance or harmony. And Hibiki Harmony is a non-age statement blend which was launched in 2015 to complement their standard blended range, which is 12-year-old, 17-year-old, 21-year-old, and a 30-year-old, which is nigh impossible to find. So those age statements are that the age of the malt whiskies that are within that blend are the minimum of that age upwards. That's why the 30-year-old's so hard to get hold of. So this is malt whiskies from the Yamazaki and Hakushu distilleries, but then also grain whiskey from another distillery they owned, which is in the Aichi prefecture in a place called Chita. It's the Chita distillery, but not cheetah as in the animal, Chita, Chita. So this is what the bottle looks like. You're looking at 51 quid at both Master of Malt and the Whiskey Exchange, but it's a very, very beautiful bottle. What's interesting, and this is one of the things particularly about Japan as a whole, as a culture, is everything has meaning. It's not obvious all the time, but everything has meaning. You'll notice that the bottle has, like, it's a cylinder, but it has faces on the bottle. So as you put your hand, you can kind of feel these individual faces. There are 24 facets around the bottle, and those 24 facets represent the 24 seasons in the Japanese lunar calendar. Total news to me. Only just found that out. Brilliant. That's the sort of stuff that I love, that you wouldn't know otherwise. It's not obvious, it's cultural, it's not even necessary. They don't have to do that, but they do, because it means something. So 43%. So this is the cheaper end of the Hibikis. The Hibikis are fairly expensive to get hold of. Because they're from Japan, they've got to come over here, and they don't export an awful lot, so that kind of puts the price up. But this is the cheaper end of it. But this is their no age statement entry level. This is the Harmony, no age statement, and then you will go to the 12 to the 17. Now, I am still a bit bunged up, you can probably tell with my voice. I can just about smell. I'm probably, unfortunately, not going to get 100% of everything that this whiskey is going to offer me, and the one after that, but I'm certainly going to try my best. Now, straight away, there's a sort of oiliness to it. Do excuse me. That's very rude of me, but I really want to try and clean my nose. But there's a definite nuttiness to it, and a white grape feel. Oh yeah, there's definite nut coming through, but it's like a peanut brittle. Yeah, peanut brittle, where it's that slightly caramelised but not burnt caramel. I didn't do the colour. The colour looks good. Whether they've added colouring or not to it, I have absolutely no idea. Likewise with Irish. I never found out. Nobody ever came back to me to say Irish don't add colour, or they do add colour, or they've got to state it or anything like that. I don't know what the situation is with Japanese either. It's entirely possible that they have, with it being a no age statement, because the ages of this could be, it could be as young as 4, 6, something like that. But there's a slight oiliness to it, but there's a definite peanut brittle, so it's like nuts and caramel together. But it's nice, it's not overpowering. But there's a freshness to it as well. There's a good deal on that, even with my stuff that load. It's a really nice sweetness. That peanut brittle actually carries on, but it's not It's not obvious, but it is there. It's underlying of kind of, and it's peanuts, almost cashew nuts actually. In fact, yeah, we're getting more towards less peanut brittle and more towards like honey roasted cashews. But there's a really nice candy floss character to it. Now, if you put a big lump of candy floss in your mouth and it melts in your mouth with a slight, it's not really a fizz, but as it disintegrates into your mouth, it very lightly bubbles. I don't know if I'm really describing that right, but that's kind of what this whiskey has, a sensation of soft, light, meringue candy flossiness to it. It's a sweet whiskey. It's really gentle as well. That is really nice. It's very, very delicate. Very delicate indeed. But the sweetness carries through and it actually lingers on the finish. Is there a smokiness to it? Arguably, yes. And I think that's the influence from the Hakushu, which is more of a smoky whiskey. Not Islay levels of peatiness, but it has got, I remember having a Hakushu 12 several years ago, but it's one of the ones that have stuck with me in terms of surprising me of the smokiness that was there. But it was a bonfire, log fire smokiness, and not too dissimilar, in fact, to the Connemara Irish. And this has that element. This has that sweet, subdued, gentle smokiness. Now, it's not as obvious as something like Connemara or what I remember the Hakushu 12, which I think I have on the list. I think I've got on the list. But there is a definite, very, very subtle smokiness, but it's not enough to put anybody off that doesn't like peated whiskey. It's nowhere near that sort of level, but it lifts everything. So you've got this sweetness, you've got these peanut brittle, honey roasted cashews, candy floss, as well as this very, very soft smokiness, almost like a smoked dessert. It's very, very difficult to describe. There's bags of flavour in this. It's really, really nice. It's very easy drinking. Maybe not necessarily, well, it might work after dinner, but I don't think it would be like after a big heavy meal with a cigar in front of a log fire. It's not that. It's after a lighter meal. It's more of a summer spring whiskey. More of a summer whiskey than a spring whiskey. It's not quite light and bouncy enough, like the Belgian Ale or something like that. This is more of a summer whiskey where you've had a really nice meal al fresco, but it's been grilled chicken or grilled salmon and salad and new potatoes and butter and eaten mess for pudding. And then you want a whiskey that is light and easy to drink but still has something about it, but is going to carry on the sweetness of the dessert you've had. I think that is fantastic. I think that's really, really nice. I could drink lots of that. I wouldn't recommend it because I don't think you should drink lots of anything, to be perfectly honest. But that is a delicate, a little bit more smokiness is coming through now as well. But again, it's still not overpowering. It's actually just complementing everything that is a really bloody good whiskey. Really nice. Is it worth 50 quid? To be honest, with the package as well, I think if you were giving that as a present and somebody said, right, I've got 50 quid to spend for somebody that I know likes whiskey and they don't necessarily like peated whiskey, but they like something that's very good and very easy drinking, as a present with the bottle, with the whole package that you get with it, do you know what? I do think that is worth 50 quid. I don't think that's overpriced. I really don't. I think that's an absolute cracker. Even though it's a no age statement blended whiskey, there is enough in that to justify, along with the bottle itself and everything that surrounds it, there is enough in that justifies 50 quid. I think that's an absolute corker. Right, quick rinse out, because that's been a bit of a long one, because I had to talk about Japanese whiskey as well. Quick rinse out, we'll crack on with the next one, and then I'll get this thing uploaded. I'll see you at the next one. Cheers.